Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of In the Red with Curtis White. We are recording this episode a little over a week after the Cyclocross World Championships that were down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, here in the United States. And honestly, I'm still coming off of the high from this race and from the weekend as a whole. Just to experience the World Championships, coming to the U.S. for the second time in my career, but this time as a pro, in front of my family, my friends, and my community, just the whole experience was surreal. I took a lot of pride in coming through with a strong performance, but also with dedicating myself to the process as an athlete to bring my best to this event. This was a race that I've been looking forward to for several years now. It's been a big goal of mine, and just to have everything come to fruition and come together like it did, I was very happy with it, and I'm excited to talk more about it. But of course, none of this would have been possible without the support of USA Cycling, the hard work and dedication of their staff, the generous donors of the Mud Fund, my team, our mechanics, Mike, Stu, Gary, and Mark, our sponsors, my coaches, mentors, my support network back home, to all the fans who showed up to support us, and the countless people behind the scenes that have worked tirelessly to really pull this together. We're all pursuing sport at a high level here, and none of it comes easy. So I'm coming away from this experience with an immense amount of gratitude. So really all I have to say to everyone behind this event was just thank you. I'm excited to sit down and talk about it all with my co-host Tony, as well as reflect on the cyclocross season as a whole. But before we dive into that, I have a couple quick notes for you. First, I want to let you all know that this episode is sponsored by Whoop. Whoop is a personalized digital fitness, health, and recovery tool that I've found extremely helpful in my preparation for the World Championships and all season long. The wristband and app have allowed me to closely monitor my recovery, my sleep, and overall health when I'm pushing my body to its limits. It measures basic biometrics like heart rate variability, respiratory rate, your daily strain, skin temperature, blood oxygen, and more. Whoop has helped me form healthier habits around my training, my traveling, my racing, and really in life overall. To get in the green, you can go to whoop.com, that's WHOOP, and use the code INTHERED, no capitals, no spaces, so you can save on your first Whoop purchase. That's in the red to get in the green. I'll include that link in the show notes below. Also, I want to let you all know about a new event to put on your calendars. May 22nd, 2022, look out for the Keuka Gravel Classic on Bike Reg. It's a brand new event starting out at the Steuben Brewery in Hammondsport, New York. My co-host here, Tony, as well as our friends Chad and Blaine at the Steuben Brewery, are putting on an awesome event with a challenging course with beautiful views all around the Finger Lakes of New York. Afterwards, there'll be plenty of New York Curtis Cyclocross Pilsners back at the brewery to cap off a fun day on the bike. Go check that out on Bike Reg. We'll link that in the show notes below as well. Lastly, promise, thank you all for listening and supporting the show up to this point. If you haven't done so yet, I ask that you like, share, subscribe, or leave a comment wherever you get your podcasts. All of that helps us grow the show and get more folks involved. So that's all I have for right now. Let's get into it. And welcome in the ring.
On the start line, Curtis White here from you.
Razendsnel in dat trappelen.
And ready to go here in Bredena, and we are underway. Van der Poel alongside Curtis White. Tonart right alongside him, and it's the American that gets a whole shot.
Dat was ronde 1 en op de laatste.
The coffee tasted good this morning. He's got a new podcast, In the Red. To see him with such a great start today, I know a lot of American fans are going to be really pumped by this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back in the red. We're coming off the Cyclocross World Championships that were held down in Fayetteville, Arkansas. This is a race, an event we've been looking forward to for several years now. It's been my focus as an athlete, and man, I'm still buzzing from that weekend, Tony. I mean, we're recording this a bit late. Took a week to catch my breath, to enjoy some downtime at home, to be with my family and friends, and I'm still hyped off it. But How was it watching on your end?
Oh man, dude, I'm so happy for you. It was so fun. We were in my living room watching it with my kids and my father-in-law and my wife, and we're going nuts the whole time. I'm texting with friends who are watching it in different places. Our buddies down at Steuben Brewing, they're watching it down there. We're texting back and forth. We're watching the ticker. Oh, he's moving up. He's in this group. I mean, it was so exciting. I'm so happy for you. I'm so proud of you. I love the video that came out afterward. You hugging your mom and dad. Like, to me, that sort of like brought it all together. Was like, that was it, man. So I don't know. Congratulations, man. I'm stoked. It was awesome.
Well, thank you very much. But that's really what it's about. This year was kind of the opportunity this was the rebound for U.S. cyclocross. And we've been saying this all year long. We had 3 World Cups in the U.S. We had this new USCX series. We had a lot of high level racing, and then we had the World Championships coming to home soil here. We had more televised races in the US than we have ever before. I think 13 total races were televised, including all the USCX, the World Cups, Nationals, and the World Championships on US soil. And to have the US scene coming together for the World Championships in Fayetteville, it was such a cool environment. People I've seen, people that I know that have been a part of my community, or I've been a part of their community for years, people who have helped get me involved in this sport a long time ago. My family was there. I had friends there. And then there were people that I've never met before come up and just wanting to say hello. And just showing that support was huge. That environment there, it was absolutely surreal. Every lap I did on that course, I got chills, whether it was doing an easy recon lap or in the race. I was getting goosebumps.
Yeah, I was bummed not to be there, obviously. It wasn't a year where I could travel to go do that. But I tell you what, I'm really grateful to the people that were able to produce so much racing that we could watch this year. You mentioned it, 13 races. What an effort that we saw from GCN and Flow Bikes to put together great racing for us all year, from all the race directors who were able to help get those on. Like, as a fan, truly, as much as we take shots here once in a while or make jokes, or I do anyway, I do really, really genuinely appreciate that I could sit with my family on Sunday and watch racing at that caliber and enjoy it, not just on the World Championships, but all year long. So, awesome stuff. It's a great prospect for the future.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that this year was our rebound, like I said earlier. And I think we've said this in a few episodes throughout the season, that this is U.S. cyclocross's rebound to not just get back to normal, but to reach a higher level for the sport in the U.S. and in North America, because this is a Eurocentric sport, but it's a sport that has solid following and a lot of passion here in North America. So we're able to produce really good products. And I think the athletes are committing themselves more and more to this. I think everyone likes to talk about the days of the USGP, the glory days. And then there was a little bit of a lull, but I think this is our rebound. As athletes, to commit ourselves more to the sport. I'd love to see more opportunities for this. And it's clear that USA Cycling, what they put into this event and the resources they allocated to the athletes with the national team and through their funding with the Mud Fund, it was just tremendous to be a part of that program and to represent my country on home soil. It was a very proud moment for me. And I very much enjoyed it as an athlete, as a person, and took a lot of pride in representing.
Yeah. And I think, as much as you talk about the rebound concept, and I know I get what you're saying and the way that comes out for the racing itself, but we're also in totally new territory in the accessibility we have for people to watch it and for people to become fans of it. And those fans are going to create more racers, more young people in the sport. So that, to me, that's a huge piece that's not existed before. That as much as we've had ups and downs over the course of cyclocross, that part has never been there. And that part, I think, is going to be a big deal going forward.
Yeah, I agree. So fingers crossed. This is going to generate a lot of interest and, for brands, sponsors, and people to get involved, but also for athletes to up their game and to reach a higher level and to perform at that higher level and to represent more on the international stage. So
So as we kind of talk about the season here and we want to reflect on the season as a whole, let's dig into the race at first. I mean, I think people want to hear sort of what was your experience going through that race. What were the crowds like? What was it like racing on that course? What were you thinking as you fought for positions going through it? What were you thinking when you started?
My former teammate and mentor, Stephen Hyde, his advice was don't think. And he shared that with me once before the race and then once during the race. Because it's such the speeds were so high, and you were going through, I mean, there were sections of the course that were very high consequence. This descent, this winding descent down in the first third of the lap. You're absolutely flying down this descent, trying to hold the wheel in front of you, not let the gap go, protecting the inside to make sure no one from behind you is jumping you before the corner. And you have to hit the rut perfectly or the line perfectly. And there were several crashes in the race. You needed full focus 100% of the time. And if you were overthinking at any part of this course or hesitating at all, that's where mistakes were made. And likewise before the race, if you're overthinking, that's when the nerves start to settle in and you start to become anxious and just starting to overthink the situation that you're in, which is just because it's the World Championships or because there's 10,000 people on site that day, or you're performing in front of your friends or your family, you don't automatically gain 50 more watts. You're still the same athlete you were the day before or the week before. You're still the athlete that was training all season long for an event like this. Just because it's this special day, you don't gain these superpowers. You're still the same person. You're still the same athlete. So you need to know how to kind of block out all these distractions around you. The banners, the flags, the people that want pictures or autographs, or it's as amazing as all that was. There were moments where I just had to shut it out. To the folks that were yelling at me on my pre-ride laps, I heard you, but I didn't always respond, because if I'm responding to every single person, that's a lot of effort going towards not studying the course and making sure that all my energy is going into the track in front of me. So there was the best advice, I think, would be just don't think. And that helped. Every moment that I had in the race to jump or to follow the wheel, or it just no hesitation, make a move, make a decision. If you have two options in front of you, choose. Have confidence in your decision and move forward. Don't dwell on any decision or any mistake. Just keep moving forward, moving forward, moving forward. And that's what the entire hour was about. Just kind of having the knife between the teeth, not focusing on anything that just happened about, you're focusing on what's next. And it was funny because I didn't see the lap counters for the first 4 laps or for the first half of the race. I didn't have, I guess, the bandwidth to even look up as I'm going onto the finish line to see how many laps I had left to go, because I knew that that's a distraction right there. It doesn't matter if it was 8 laps to go or 2 laps to go. My objective was to hold the wheel in front of me. That was it. So I think that the first time I saw the counters was 3 to go.
Is there a point in there where like, hey, I'm in a solid top 15 and I'm competing for top 10? Like, is that going through your head at all, or do you not have time to process or understand that?
I had to push that out of my head, because I knew I was on a good day. I knew I was on a very good ride, and I was all season long in Europe. The group I was in at Worlds was the group that I was trying to be a part of through all the Euro races. The group I was in we had Kevin Kuhn, the Swiss champion, Don Sota, Ton van der Bosch, Felipe Orts, Ben Turner, Joshua Dubois, Michael Boros. These are fast wheels. They're wheels that I was trying to follow, and that was the group I wanted to be a part of while I was in Europe. And the first couple laps, I was a little bit behind. I knew I had the depth to ride up to the tail end of that group in the races in Europe, and I had some really strong rides and consistent rides through the course of an hour. But there were a lot of near misses. So just because I was a part of this group at the World Championships, that wasn't, I couldn't lose focus on, all right, I'm here, what's next? I had to keep thinking about just hold the wheel, maintain, take advantage where I can get it. That's all I was thinking. And there was a point in the race where I was fighting for 8th, or I was just bridging up to the front group. After 2 laps, there was a point in the race where the race kind of came together just before Pitcock attacked. And that was a moment for me to connect with that front group. And as an American athlete, to be racing the world championships on home soil, to make it in the front group was something that it was incredible just to experience that. But I couldn't let that distract me. It very easily could have. And once it distracted me too much, that's where I would have risked crashing at a high speed or missing the rut in the corner or just completely ruining the race. So I had to, at the minute I had a thought like that come into my mind, I had to immediately divert it. And I knew that there would be distractions in the race. So I had a phrase that I've been using for a couple of years now, head and hands. And over the years, I've had this written on my handlebars, head and hands. Where am I right now? Where are my hands? Where's my head? If my hands are in good position, if I'm looking where I want to go, if my head is in a good position, I'm breathing right, I'm looking where I want to go, if my hands are in good position, I'm able to shift properly, feather the brakes, handle the bike well, everything else will follow. So I again, anytime there was a distraction, I kind of reverted back to this saying, just head and hands, refocus, recenter, focus on the task at hand.
So when you get done, what happens then? Like you come across the line. What do you understand about what you've done, and what are you thinking at that point?
Well, I mean, it was even up to the end, it was a very tactical race. Like I had to shut out all the noise and then still execute tactically. On the last lap, Ton van der Bosch and Don Sota, they attacked up the last climb, or the big power line climb, and I was 2 wheels too far back to follow. I felt like I physically could have, but I was just too far back. That was a mistake. Move on. Where am I now? I have to win this group. Don't focus on chasing down right now. And it turned into the sprint. If you saw the sprints coming into that final corner, if everyone waited until they hit the pavement, anyone in the front lost the sprint. So I knew that I had to start the sprint from further out. And I have confidence in my long sprint. So 2 corners from the finish line is where I started my sprint. I was leading out this group there were probably 5 wheels behind me. If I got the jump before the pavement and the riders behind me were out of my draft, then I felt like I could have held it off. But if I came onto the pavement while they were in my draft, then there was a good chance they were going to come around me because they were coming off this hill. They had the slingshot effect and the draft. So that was a risk right there. It paid off. And just when you're in a moment like that and you're racing in a group, first off, and you're at your limit and you win the battle in your group, like that's a win right there. It's not, you may not have won the race, but it's a battle that you won. And that feeling right there is just, it's an awesome feeling. It's that relief. You tried something, you risked it, and it paid off. But then you add on the fact that World Championships, home country, racing for a top 10, finishing 12th. It was a career best World Championship result for me, a career best result, I would say. Having friends and my family was there. The support of USA Cycling and the national team and Cannondale Cyclocross World, and just the amount of support that we had through that entire week, the resources that went into it, the production of this race, it all just came through. And I was very, that was an opportunity to kind of take it all in. Like this just happened. And it took a while to kind of have that gravity resonate with me. But yeah, it was definitely, I needed a couple deep breaths after that.
So what were the crowds like? I heard it was just great energy, really exciting. How did it feel to have a crowds like that on US soil?
It was, yeah, again, that was, it was just incredible. I think if people were paying attention to what they saw online, you'd think that there was going to be barely anyone there watching on site, but to see people coming in to support the athletes and to support U.S. cyclocross and this event. It was just incredible. Like, but I said this earlier that even in the pre-ride laps, there are parts of this course where I was getting goosebumps just because of the noise, the support, the enthusiasm, the energy that I could feel. It was just unreal. So it was just so cool to see. And then again, my family was there. The sacrifice of not being home in about 2 months. I was home very briefly in Beverly, Massachusetts for a couple of days after coming back from Europe. So I was gone from the national championships through Europe for about a month. Came home, recharged for only a couple of days. Then I left for training camp. Went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and dedicated every minute of the day was dedicated towards preparing for the World Championships. And having that training camp, that environment, to just kind of focusing in on my process as an athlete, kind of shutting out the rest of the world, shutting off the phone when, I needed to, staying off the internet, staying away from some of the negativity, and just kind of, again, focusing on what's my process as an athlete. And then just to see that support. Yeah. I don't know. I'm going to be saying the words incredible. But yeah, I really just don't have enough good things to say about just the energy I felt at that course. And I think it's all the international athletes too felt it.
What were some of the responses you got from the Europeans that you talked to when, as far as competing here at Worlds? Did they seem to enjoy the experience? Was it up to par for them?
They loved it. Everyone that I talked to, they cited the energy, the enthusiasm of the people there. It was just, everyone was there for the love of sport and for the love of cyclocross. I think it's something that they often bring up is the fans in Europe, they're there to support one rider or two riders. But in the US, the fans support everyone. They love making the noise. They love just having that energy and pushing everyone on. That's something that they love when they come here, and they feed off that.
After having a week to kind of process and get home and get settled in, how do you feel now about what you've accomplished? Second highest finish ever from an American male, your career best, something you've been focused on for a long time, building toward this particular race. Like, how does that one day now stand for you after you've had a little bit of time to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely a career best ride, I think, and a career best result. I've had some pretty incredible highs over the last couple of years, and there have been plenty of days where I haven't had that high, but for several years, focus in on this event and be very process oriented. The one thing that I was thinking about in the last month leading into this event, and it was in part staying off of social media or staying off the phone as much as I can. And I did a training camp in Albuquerque with Mike Vandenham, and just having another athlete there was just, it was great to have that from an athletic standpoint, because you have another athlete who's very like-minded and driven and who has similar goals to you, that you're able to create a solid environment and just have someone that keeps you honest and holds you accountable in the training and the nutrition and the sleeping and the recovery, all of these things around sport. And there are times when you focus in on one event and it doesn't always work out. It's only one day of the year, but I was thrilled to have this work out on this day. And it really is a team effort for my trade team, but also with USA Cycling, again, just with all the supporters from the Mud Funds through USA Cycling, the staff, the mechanics there. Stephen Hyde, former teammate and mentor, was the on-site team coach. So it's just there's a lot of positive energy around this day. And something that I was thinking about the last month leading into the race was, what are my values as a person and as an athlete? And kind of differentiating what are, resume values versus eulogy values. How do I want to operate? There are times that you want to show off, kind of be good with the social media and kind of promote products and, work with your branding as an athlete. And all those things are very important in the big picture, but also what are my values as a person? How do I want to operate day in and day out? How do I want to dedicate myself to this craft? What do I want to get out of this day, this training session? How do I want to show up? It could go well, it could go poorly. How am I going to respond? How am I going to carry myself? And how am I going to connect with the people around me and promote this sport that I love and the sport that's given me so many opportunities? So that's what I was focusing on in this last month leading into the race. Kind of who am I as a person and how do I want to carry myself? Whether it's in my training sessions, in my recovery, in my interactions with people, and how I raced on that day. So it was just, again, it was something that I took a lot of pride in as myself as an individual, like what my values are. And I felt like I was able to carry that through.
When you have those big career days, and you've had them before, different highs, do they permanently change you as an athlete, or do you kind of come off them and go back to sort of the mindset that you were before? But I mean, when you reach that, you race with that group, you've been trying to race with that group all year in Europe, right? You're trying to make that group. The World Championships, you make that group, right? Does that change you permanently going forward?
Yeah, of course it does. You don't ever want to truly go back to the same mindset that you're in before, because everything is a growth opportunity. So this is the first time that I was able to compete in that group and be a contender for a top 10 in the World Championships. And next year, a top 10 is certainly a goal of mine when the World Championships go back to Europe and we're in Hogerheide in the Netherlands. That's the level I want to be at. So my hope is that this result will spring me forward to being comfortable in that group, so I can have more opportunities to fight for that top 10 level in Europe. And that's, yeah, there's a lot of growth that happened from that day specifically as an athlete, but also like understanding the process and what it took to dedicate myself for that month coming back from Europe to one event. So that was, and again, I was asking for help from people, from as many resources as I could. It wasn't just me doing this alone. It was the support from my team, from my trade team, Cannondale Cyclocross World, all the mechanics and staff there, from my teammates, from the staff from USA Cycling, the supporters of the Mud Fund, their friends, former competitors I was reaching out to for advice. Just kind of this attitude of ubiquitous assimilation, looking for information and confidence everywhere that I could get it. So it's just continuing to grow on that and to, keep reaching forward to another level.
All right. So we got a lot of questions here from fans. You want to hit some of those?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So we'll start right here. Top. John says, how do American fans compare to fans in Belgium or other European countries?
I think we kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but even the European riders will say this when they come over to the States, that the US fans cheer for everyone. Whether you're in first or last, it's just a wall of noise. Where in Europe, it's a little bit more, everyone's broken up into their fan clubs, or you have the Wout van Aert section, you have the Van der Poel section, you have the Lucinda Brand section. Like everyone's kind of like a little bit more segregated in that way, where it's just, you can go through sections of the course that are a little bit more quiet. I've noticed over the last couple of years that, well, particularly this past year in Namur, I guess it's been a couple of years since we've done a race in Europe where there's been spectators, but this year at Namur, it was a wall of noise everywhere. And maybe that was just because that was one of the few races that they could have spectators at, and it was just, everyone's excited to have the racing back and for there to be the fans of the races. But traditionally, there are parts of the course where there are a lot of people, but maybe not as noisy. So that's, a big props to the US fans. Just kind of everywhere we went through the course in Fayetteville, it was just a wall of noise, no matter what placing. Wearing the Stars and Stripes jersey helped, I think. But yeah, I think everyone's kind of noticed that that's just how the US fans are.
Very cool. I like that. I think fans could get wrap their heads around that. Jim says, how do you deal with such low tire pressure and those high speed, high G corners?
So I was running Challenge Grifo tires, 25, 26 PSI. It was a very, very dry course for those who watched. I'm sure you were able to see it. It was pretty obvious. But there were parts of the day that, or earlier in the weekend, where it was freezing overnight and thawing out during the day. So there are parts of the course that were very, some slick spots, some ruts were forming. But as the weekend went on, the temperatures rose and we weren't freezing and thawing out. There weren't any slick spots. For when we raced, there was no slick spots whatsoever. So there were some riders I saw that were going more towards a file tread tire, because you want a tire that has that low rolling resistance. But I felt as though that I needed a tire that, and really everyone in the top 15 had a Grifo style tire where you needed grip because you're absolutely flying through these sections and you don't want to slip at all. And it takes a lot of technique. There were some criticisms in the press about how this course wasn't technical enough. How it wasn't a true cyclocross course. And I disagree with that, because it's, to be honest, first off, whatever course that is thrown at us, we're not complaining about it. The racers, I mean, we deal with whatever conditions, whatever courses are thrown in front of us, whatever features, and all of that. Our objective is to get from A to B as quick as possible. And with it being that dry and fast, that alone took a lot of skill. So yeah, we were going through some of these turns at really high speeds, and there were some, teeth chattering moments where it was just, if you took the wrong line or you missed the rut, you're going ass over tea kettle and you're going to end up further down the hill. But it definitely took a lot of skill, and that's part of the training. Something that we've talked about through this podcast series is, if it's wet and raining, go out and practice sliding around. Try these features that sometimes scare you. You don't want to hurt yourself, but go into uncharted territory and always kind of look to try something new, or to step into that uncomfortable zone, because that's where true growth happens, especially when you're trying to work with technique. No one's born with good technique. Some people just start with it earlier, or have different riding conditions or areas closer to them that they're on a regular basis. So just always trying to step in that uncharted territory. And it's taken a lot of training and effort to get to a good technical level. And so that's the long roundabout response to your question. But yeah, it wasn't just a Mario Kart track out there. It was definitely, it did require skill in parts, and you really had to pace the effort well, and really make sure that you were maintaining your traction.
All right. Sky asks, what were your goals heading into Worlds?
My goal was the top 10. I felt as though that with the level I was at, with a clean race, I could get to that point. It certainly wasn't going to be easy. And obviously, like that's what I thought coming into it. And obviously it wasn't, because everyone's at the World Championships and that everyone's bringing their best. And I knew I needed a clean race to get to that point. And again, just to be in contention for that, and to set a goal like that, and to come really, really close. That was huge. But yeah, top 10 was my initial goal coming into this.
So we got one from a 9-year-old fan who was there cheering you on. And this youngster wants to know, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much fun was the course?
10.
10.
If you were going fast enough and you weren't going backwards, it was a 10. I'd imagine if you were going backwards, it was a little lower on the scale.
All right. Chris says, how important was it not to go into the red too early and jump group to group?
Man, I was in the red from the beginning.
I would think. I assume that, that was going to be a fast start, and you knew it was going to have to be a fast start. Like, there was no secret going in.
And so there were a couple of additions from the World Cup that we saw in October. About a minute into the course, there was a little, I'm sure fans were able to identify it. There was a little jet up into the woods. It filed down the racing pretty quickly. And it was on loose ground. So there were some mistakes that were being made there, but it really funneled down the start early on. And that it made the start very crucial. I knew that coming into the race, I wanted to nail my start and get good position, but that didn't happen. I actually was pretty far back in the start. I was maybe outside the top 20, definitely further back than I wanted to be. But I had it in my head to, all right, forget just what happened. Keep moving forward, keep moving forward, keep moving forward, and kind of have the knife between the teeth, take advantage of anything that's in front of you. Keep jumping when you can, know when you have to rest, and know when you have to pin it. And I did have faith that the race was going to come together after a couple laps, because it was pretty easy to identify that it was going to be group racing. I thought that the under 23 men's race was a very good indicator of what our race could potentially look like earlier in the weekend. So I was watching that race. I watched the replay a couple times. I was able to kind of see at what points of the course I could use that slingshot effect, or when did I want to be driving it and when did I want to be in the wheels, kind of hiding and conserving my energy, and how did the course flow overall. So I was trying to study that race to get some good indicators on how our race could potentially play out. But also, I mean, if it didn't play out that way, I just had to keep rolling with the punches. But it was critical to not go into the red, but also there were points in the race where, if there were 5 laps to go, I had to act as if it was the last lap, because I could not lose the wheel in front of me. If I lost the wheel in front of me, you'd be racing. You wouldn't have the surging effect. You wouldn't be able to recover when the group was recovering. And you just have this more drawn out diesel effort. I think a rider who was on good form, but maybe missed the split, was Eric Bruner. He came into it very strong. He's on good form, but he was just behind my group, and he rode a very consistent race. But again, because he wasn't in the group, he wasn't able to take advantage of those surges and the resting points. So it's a little bit more complicated. You don't want to go into the red too consistently, but there are points where you have to say, I cannot lose this group. Under no circumstances can I lose this group. I need to pretend as though the finish is a half lap from now and give everything I have just to hold the wheel, if that means I can maintain this group. Because once you lose the group, it's gone. The race is going on. Everyone's going without you. So there were points of urgency where you couldn't think about conserving to the end. But I think it just took kind of patience and maturity to kind of how do you measure that effort out?
Yeah, well, along with that, Paul asked, it appeared from the sidelines that you were on the limit the whole race. Were you?
Paul, that is a very astute observation, because yes, I absolutely was. But to go back to the energy and the noise and the fans at that race, that was a big motivating factor for me. So that for all of that, I'm very, very appreciative for.
We kind of talked a lot about this already, but Gary asks, how over the moon were you with your finish?
Over the moon and back.
This was an interesting one. Andrew asks, did you have any bike changes during the race?
No, I didn't. And I'm very happy that I didn't. It also, because the race was so high speed and the track was so fast, it was very high consequence to change a bike. Even if I felt like I needed water, you're going to lose 10 seconds just going into the pits alone, and you're going to lose the group instantly. So my number one objective was to stay out of the pits, have complete and total confidence in my setup from the start. Because if you went into the pits, that meant you were going to lose the group or any chance of racing for a top 10. So it's the pits were really reserved for serious issues.
How common is that for you when you race at particularly like the World Cup level, like when you're at that caliber, to go a whole race without a bike change? Is that something that happens frequently?
It certainly happens. I think you need to be ready for anything, but there are races that it's very crucial to stay out of the pits. There was I had a conversation with one of the media guys from Sporza, and we saw some criticisms in the press about how this wasn't a world championship caliber course. It wasn't difficult enough. I disagree with that. Just there are a number of World Cup or World Championship level courses that have a similar profile to what we saw in Fayetteville. The course in Tabor, Czech Republic, for example, it's very wide open. There's some elevation there. There's a short run up, and the barriers are really the only critical feature on that course. Otherwise, it's so high speed, and it's just following the wheel. And for the most part, it's group racing. And you're really also dependent on the weather conditions swaying how difficult the course is. We saw the weather played a critical part in the World Cup at Fayetteville earlier this year. The warm-up day in October, the day before when we were doing course recon, bone dry, very similar conditions to what we saw at Worlds. The next day, it rained several inches, and boom, it was just a diesel tractor pull effort the entire day out there. So it was a couple other courses that come to mind. The course in Zolder, wide open, very fast track. If you lose the wheel, you're done. If you're in the pits, you lose 10 seconds. And up until recently, they didn't have barriers. They added the barriers only a couple years ago. Same with Hogerheide. Maybe they added the barriers to Hogerheide a little, a couple of years further back from Zolder, but still, it's a very, when it's dry, it's a very fast track. It's wide open. There's some elevation, and it's group racing, really. I mean, we saw the sprint play out in a number of races in Hogerheide over the last couple of years, where you need that slingshot effect, and you could very easily argue that that's not a true cross course either, if you're holding that same standard to Fayetteville. But I think that the attention that descent required, it was, I thought it was technically challenging, just because you need to hit the rut just right at high speeds. It was a big effort to come up the power line climb, and the climb itself as a whole wasn't the most difficult part. It was going up and over the climb by pit 1. And then you had this hump and this little, like the camel hump feature with the off camber on the other side. That was one of the most critical parts of this course, where if you come into it rested, it's a very easy feature to go up and over. But when you're in the red, your legs are zapped, you're going cross-eyed because you're trying to hold the wheel in front or try to get away. We saw a lot of mistakes on that part of the course. And coming off that feature, it was the accordion effect was in full effect there, because you couldn't come out of this feature directly on someone's wheel. There was always, if you came into this feature on someone's wheel, coming out, there was a 2-3 bike length gap. And now if you're in a group of 5, if there's 2 or 3 bike lengths between every person, that's the accordion effect. You're slowly going to get tailed off. If you're in that position every single lap, you're going to get tailed off the group. So that's an aspect of cyclocross that we often see, especially on those courses that I was just talking about, the Tabors, the Zolders, the Hogerheides. That's tactics, that's skill. Those are things you need to race your bike. It's
Kind of right along those same lines, Andrew asked, what was the hardest physical part of the course versus the hardest technical part?
Yeah, it's the hardest physical part was up and over the climb, because you saw the power line climb, very difficult, but it's also very not easy. But for an experienced rider, your limits, and you could say, I can be at this level, I can do 600 watts up this climb consistently every lap. But there were a couple humps up and over the top. You had a left right by pit 1, and you had another hump going into that little interesting camel hump off camber feature that we were just talking about. From the last hump up over the power line climb, you take the left right past pit 1 up. There was another hump as we turned slightly to the left, that was the most physically demanding part of the course. And that's where a lot of the gaps were cemented. It wasn't about who was going hardest at the beginning of the climb. It was about who was able to really turn it up over the top of the climb and able to carry composure into that little camel hump, little off-camber feature. I don't know exactly what to call it, but that tricky feature that we saw, a lot of people were dabbing or had to put a foot down or just got stalled and had to get off their bikes and remount the top. Vincent Bostons had a scary crash there on the first lap. It was really unfortunate to see. He came away with a concussion, I think, but that's one of those things where you have that accordion effect. Everyone gets jammed up on top of coming off this physically demanding feature. And then technically, everyone was pushing the limit on the descent. That was certainly very difficult. That took a lot of skill and attention and focus. That camel hump feature we were just talking about took a lot of skill after a big max effort when you're in the red. But there are a lot of deceiving features on the course that weren't challenging on the spot. Like if you go to the World Cup in Namur and you're on the side of the Citadel and you look down the slopes and you just see this drop straight down or the off camber, the drop that goes onto the base of the cobblestone climb in Namur, or just a couple features that come to mind. You are totally fresh in a pre-ride lap and you're looking at a feature there and you say, this scares me. There weren't a lot of features like that in Fayetteville, but it took those max efforts to really bring out the difficulty and to really expose where people's weaknesses were and people were making mistakes. And then it added up from there.
Caitlin asks, what music did you listen to before the race?
I've been mixing up my warm-up playlist. But I've been listening to some like Tomorrowland mixes. I got inspired from that when we raced in Boom last year in Belgium. That's where the big Tomorrowland EDM music festival is. And you just have these, everyone's, the music's bumping, the bass is heavy. It's not a lot of words, so there's not a lot of thinking you need to do. You're focused on your warm up, you're focused on the race, and you just have noise, the thumping and the bass, and that was a good warm up playlist for me. So to be honest, I don't think I can go back and find the same tune, but it was a good track.
All right. Ben says, do you periodize your motivation focus through the long season? August to February is a long time.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. As you would kind of create a training plan at ebbs and flows, and the periodization of the training plan, you focus on different skills or zones at certain points in the year. You have your part of the year where you're focused on your base training. You have parts of the year that you want to be doing more threshold work or more VO2, or you want to be working more anaerobically, or parts of the year that you really want to sharpen up. You're bringing down the volume. It's all about that periodization that's the physiological periodization, but you also have the mental component of, I wouldn't have the bandwidth. Let's say this. If I have 30 race days or 35 race days throughout the entire cross season, I don't have the bandwidth to approach every single day like a world championships. It's very difficult to do that. It's mentally and physically exhausting, but you still approach every single event with intent, with purpose, and with focus. But that's a difficult question. It's interesting to think about because, yeah, of course you can't. I wasn't approaching Roanoke the same way that I was approaching the World Championships. I still wanted to win in Roanoke. I still executed well. I still held myself to a high standard. I had the attention to detail, but a lot of that is clockwork at this point in my career. And as an athlete, there's so many hours that I've dedicated towards this craft of making sure the tires are exactly the way I want them, the attention I give towards selecting the right equipment, the tire pressure, where I want to line up on the grid, the lines that I'm choosing. How do I be creative in the middle of the course or in the middle of the race if things aren't going my way, or if someone's in my way, or if I get pinched, or how do I respond to that? There are days that it doesn't work out and I don't respond well, but I think that there was a lot of there was a lot of physical and mental energy going into a world championship level race, where that's again the crescendo of the season. Everything is going to that point in the year. And I think normal athletes have the bandwidth to have a couple of those days where that amount of energy goes into a few days, like a championship, or, you know, if you're aiming a certain World Cup. But it's untenable to do that for 35 race days in a season.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. How about Jack says, do you think about or train your body language on the bike?
I do. When I'm doing, you know, VO2 pieces on the road, or, you know, skills training, I was talking about this earlier, but head and hands. Where are my hands? How they've positioned on the bike. If I'm in a good position, I'm able to drive the bike well. Where am I looking? Where's my head? Am I looking upright? I'm not slouched. I'm able to breathe clearly, looking where I want to go. You're acting with intent with everything that you do. So if I'm doing VO2 pieces, I try to maintain that composure as much as I can, or as deep into the pieces as I can. There's definitely a point where you have that weak spot where you're going so hard that your shoulders start to slouch, or your head starts to drop, or you're really just kind of, that's when you're giving it all out. But there, you can train that to a degree. But that's just something I try to focus on a little bit when I can. But that's also a little cue that I have. If there's other athletes that they want to take it and use it, fine by me. You know, it's no secret for me. It's something that works for me, and maybe it doesn't work for other people. But yeah, it takes focus to train it. I'll say that.
All right. Jacob asks, do you feel pressure when you go up against the faster guys? If so, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, there's pressure, but I think also I've been a part of I've been racing at this level for a long time, and I've been climbing the ladder for several years to where I am kind of going through the groups. And now I'm at the point where I've been trying to get into that top 10 group. And this race was the first time that I felt like I was able to do that successfully. And kind of see it through to the end, and, you know, almost get to that top 10 level. Yeah, it's a little nerve wracking. There are times when where you do get the nerves and you get a little anxious from it, but it's at some point you get comfortable with it, though, you know. And again, just kind of always putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and it's every situation is an opportunity for growth. So when you start to look at it that way, kind of the nerves, you know, calm down a little bit, and you just say, look, this is an opportunity to do something I've never done before. And just every day is a clean slate. Like, that's kind of how I've been trying to view these, you know, the last several years going over to Europe, or to, you know, really anytime I take the start line, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what group you trust the training you've been doing. And you have your goals, but it just takes that execution and kind of knowing how and when to shut out the rest of the world. So.
All right. And this is the last one. This is from Rick. He asks, how pumped are you about all the young and up and coming USA juniors?
Very. I think it was very encouraging to see, especially while we were in Europe. There were juniors, both on the boys and girls sides, that were finding success. And we were talking with Mike Vandeham in the last episode of young Canadians also finding success. So it's the sport's growing. There are more people that are getting involved. And I want to echo this point that we were talking about earlier of this season. My hope is that this season is kind of the spring forward that we need. Not only the rebound to get back to normal after the year off that we had with the pandemic, but also an opportunity for this rejuvenation of cyclocross in North America. And it does start with kind of getting more young athletes involved in that pool. And there are development opportunities, whether it's through the National Federation or privately or through clinics, and there are high level races around. It's knowing where to look and where to go and finding the right information, and learning the right technique and placing yourself around mentors and athletes and people that are more successful and better than you, and knowing or having the confidence to ask questions. All that's very important. I see more young athletes doing that. So I'm very encouraged by that, and I hope that trend continues.
Yeah, I know in this area we were extremely excited for AJ August. He's local to us, and he had a great ride and represented Western New York and represented the U.S. so well. So and that last question I read, of course, came out of this group in our local club, who was kind of also rooting the same way. So congratulations to AJ. We want to give him a shout and just how awesome he performed.
Yeah, that was really, really good to see. And I felt like this course was a really good course for AJ because he's got that road savvy. He's a part of our Cannondale Cyclocross World Development Team, but then also races on the road with the process of those programs, what goes into it, the passion behind those programs and developing young athletes, not just the athletic side, but also the character of who's on the bike. And to see an athlete like AJ, he was sprinting for fourth, but there were parts of the race you're like, oh man, if he plays this right, this is a podium. He could be winning the medal here. So that was really good to see. I thought he had a very, very strong ride. So
yeah,
AJ, hats off, man.
It was exciting, definitely.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that wraps up fan questions. How about season view here? Let's go. You want to go? We talked a little bit about it from the U.S. I think you've kind of made the point about how you feel about where we're at. How about you as an athlete? Like, how do you rate your whole campaign from August to the World Championships?
I feel as though, and I've seen this for a couple seasons now, that I have the depth to be consistent throughout almost the entire season. But this year I felt like I was able to be consistent at a higher level. I guess if that makes sense. Going all the way back to the beginning of the season, September, kicking things off with sweeping the weekend in Roanoke. I came into the year and I thought that maybe I wasn't as sharp as I should be. I knew that I had the depth because there were some gravel events that I was training for, which I think that's that's a longer conversation. Is gravel the best preparation for cyclocross? But I knew that I had the depth.
What's your short answer on that?
Short answer is it depends.
Come on.
I think if you're racing, if you're doing events like the Cuca Gravel Classic, that are 50 miles, some good steep climbs, but it's short enough, that's great cross prep. I think if from a physiological perspective, a 200-mile race is very difficult to involve that in preparation for a 1-hour anaerobic effort.
It's good analysis.
It's as much as it can be fun, but any event, I knew that I had the depth. Roanoke was solid. I knew that I still had plenty of room to improve and to sharpen up. I was at a winning level through most of the season. There was some bad luck with Rochester and Baltimore, a couple of mechanicals, but something like that it's just out of your control as an athlete. And in cyclocross, we see that. It was a shame that they're both the C1s, but it happens sometimes. But I was able to carry good form, and a battle that I look back and I take a lot of pride in was day 2 of Charm City, going into the last lap with Chris Blevins and Vincent Bastens. That was a great race. I felt like the level was really high there. And yeah, to go into the last lap with, I mean, 2 guys at that level in the sport. It was, I was proud of that moment. I was still second that day, but it was just that was a fierce battle. And I can look back on that day with a lot of pride. World Cup's coming to the US, not my best results, but still able to be at a good level there. Training, I decided to stay home through November, train through the races, but sweeping the more local races to me in Northampton. Second both days in Falmouth. Second at Pan Am's. Second at Nationals. Nationals is still, especially this year, I think I'm coming away with more motivation, because it's like I was able to be at a very consistent high level. But if you look at a rider like Brunner, and Gage has done this for a couple seasons now, where he's coming off a road schedule and he needs a little bit more time to settle into the cross season. I think both those riders did, but then they reach a higher peak. So they didn't have the same consistency, but they with higher peaks come deeper valleys. So they knew they had the patience. They had people that were guiding them through that, and I think they played their season out well. They were smart about it. So that's something that I think I need to look a bit more for going forward to get that stars and stripes.
Can I stop you there? And I wondered, coming into that, if to have maybe the sharpness that you needed to win that race, would you have lost something going into Europe and coming into the World Championships? Like, would you have had to give something up that came after that in order to have the sharpness to take that? Is there a give and take there, or can you do both?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's always a give and take, right? But I don't know. From what I see, how someone like Eric Brunner is gauge or really kind of gauge their entire season. He had the patience to, earlier in the year, he's coming off of illness after racing on the road. He had a really strong road campaign, had that depth and intensity from the road, had the patience to race into form. And by the time that, I think the first time that we really saw Brunner come on to good form was Jingle Cross. He had a couple strong rides there, and then we saw him back on it in Cincinnati. He had a strong ride the first day of Cincinnati, but then didn't have it the second day. So maybe he didn't quite have the depth, or he didn't handle the conditions well, or he didn't recover well enough from the first day of racing. But I think he just got stronger and stronger as the year went on. When I decided to stay domestic through November, stay close to home, I had Northampton and Falmouth. There were races that were both almost just over an hour and a half away from me. They were quote unquote local. I was able to train through those. So I was still able to compete at a high level, but also I was looking far enough ahead where I wanted to bring my best to nationals, but also not just nationals, my entire European campaign. And I needed the depth, not to just, I couldn't make it to the end of my European campaign running on fumes. I needed enough to make it all the way to the World Championships. So I think that the training camp that I did after Europe in prep for the World Championships, going down to Albuquerque, was kind of the cherry on top of the season, where it wasn't something that I initially had planned. I think normally at this level, when you're training for a championship, athletes typically know where they're going to be every minute of every day for the last couple months leading up to it, because everything is so, you plan everything out, everything's to a T. But we dealt with a couple curveballs where we're dealing with changing policies, and kind of the landscape in Europe was changing with Omicron, and we had to kind of stay ahead of the curve or kind of look out what's best for us, because we're in a different boat compared to everyone else, where we're not with our families, we're not with our communities, we're out of our element, out of our environment, and we made the decision to go home early before the French World Cup. I was bummed that we weren't able to race the French World Cup in Flamanville, but that was an opportunity to go dedicate myself at a training camp, get good, high quality work, and kind of recharge a little bit. So there wasn't the initial plan several months ago. That wasn't even on my radar several months ago. But we were able to react well to that and kind of use that, not going to Flamanville, the World Cup, is an opportunity, and it paid off. So I think overall, I felt like I was very consistent. I think there are some things that I'll be, some conversations I'm looking to have with my coach about how can we, reframe the periodization of the season to have a higher peak for a goal like a national championship, because I feel like I'm able to be consistently at a very high level. I have the depth to do it, but it's something that I've been missing out on for a few years now. I've had some close calls. Now 3 times silver, the last 3 championships I've had, and that is something I think about. So, just it's part of life, part of the process, and trying to always improve and bring my best to the next opportunities.
Speaking of the next opportunities, what's your off season or next season look like? I guess your next race season before cross season. I don't know if we can call it an off season now. Off season from cyclocross.
Yeah, so it's I'm trying something. Well, not trying something new. I'm going back to racing on a road program. I'll be racing with Best Buddies Racing, supported by the Best Buddies Foundation. It's a great group. I'm looking forward to getting back to the team environment on the road and get back to some high level road racing and doing some of the best races in North America. Whether it's crits or stage races, I feel like I need those race days. So I think it'll be good preparation for cyclocross for next season. I feel like I'm going to be able to reach a higher level, but then also just I'm really looking forward to enjoying that group and those races, because it's, at the end of the day, I'm a bike racer. I love racing my bike and I love fighting for the win, and I love that process, and especially in that team environment. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that I'll be racing with them April through August, and then shifting gears and back to focusing on cyclocross next fall. Well, so the focus is always on cyclocross. I'll make that one clear. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So the off season is still, I'll take a couple weeks off. I actually, it's kind of funny. Some seasons you end the season, you're cooked, you're in the red, you're burning on fumes, and you feel like you need 4 weeks before you can get back to the bike. But this year I felt like that's not the case. So it was a forced rest after Worlds. I still had energy. I felt like I would have loved to have gone over to Europe and do the final 3 weeks of the season. We're recording this after the races that we saw in Maldegem and Lille, I think it was, on Sunday. So it's, I did that block a couple of years ago. I like those races a lot, but I think this is a forced break. And I'm going to enjoy it, take some time away from the phone, a little time away from social media, enjoy time with my family and friends. And if it means, going out for a couple mountain bike rides or riding the cross bike a little bit or running or going to the gym just to kind of keep my sanity, I'll do that. But there's no pressure to get back to training for another week or so.
So that means April through August, we're a road podcast, huh?
We're going to be a bike racing podcast.
I love it, man. I love it. I love road racing, and especially Criterium. So, and the team you're on, man, what a talented, deep team that you're going to get to perform on. So I'm excited to see it. I hope we get similar quality television coverage so that I can watch it all from home, just like I got to watch cyclocross.
Yeah, doing some of the high level crits in the U.S. We're going to be doing the Rochester Twilight, which is going to be the day before the QQ Gravel Classic. So I'm going to try and get some of my teammates down for that. We're going to be hanging around the Steuben Brewery, do an awesome event. It's going to be a tough course. Again, 50 miles, about 50 miles, plenty of climbing. It's going to be some tough roads, beautiful views. We get to hang out at Steuben Brewery. I'll try to get some teammates down for that.
That'll be exciting.
We'll see. Yeah.
Get Danny Estevez down, the double champ, man.
Oh, I'd love to see him on the gravel roads. I'd like to
Me
see him
too.
just getting rad on those climbs.
I got to do a podcast with Danny a few years ago when he was just coming back into the sport. My buddy
Oh,
Todd
really?
was his coach. Yeah, he was coaching him, and Todd's telling me, "Hey, this guy, you got to hear about this guy. He's really good. He's really good." And then he comes back on. And when Danny won, was it last summer? I was
Yeah.
out on a ride, and I see the text come across my Garmin from Todd. It's like Danny won. So we've been rooting for him like since he
That's
kinda
awesome.
got back into racing, and just a great backstory and everything. So I'm excited you're going to get to compete with him. He's a good guy.
Yeah, Danny's a great guy. I have a lot of respect for him. Not as a competitor, but also he came through the development program that I did, Hot Tubes, and same with Mike Hernandez on the team. And Ben Wolf, I was teammates with him on Jelly Belly. So it's this kind of reunion of sorts with guys that I loved racing with, or former teammates or former competitors. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. But over the next week or so, a little time off the bike, and I'm not going to return to structured training for another couple weeks, but I think already I've gone out like cross country skiing or running, and I went to the gym once just to kind of make sure that the movement was still there. But that's also, it's just the sanity part of it. Just gotta, I get a little antsy, like it just sitting around and too much. I just, especially at this point, I'm not burnout. I want to get back to riding. I want to get back to it. So,
All right, man.
that's all we have.
I think so.
All right.
So we have for cyclocross 21, 22.
Yeah. Well, we still have a couple weeks left. Let's talk again soon. We'll
All right.
we'll talk about the next couple weekends of racing. I think there's one more X2O and one more Super Prestige.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
there's plenty of racing still.
We could pot about those. And then then we'll start talking about some road racing.
All right. Excellent. Well, Tony, this is a fun one. Really appreciate it. And really, for taking the time to chat all through the cyclocross season and your work behind the scenes editing, making me sound good. Really appreciate all your work. And we'll have an off season from the podcast in a couple of weeks, but I think we still have some more cross to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for allowing me to do this, man.
And
it's an absolute honor to be able to come on each week and celebrate these successes and go through this analysis. So truly very grateful.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening. We can't do this podcast without all of our listeners and all your feedback. Really appreciate everyone chiming in throughout the course of the season, asking questions. For the people at the races coming up saying, I love the podcast, or I love what you're doing, or anything that we could be doing better. We love taking that in. So that's why we do it. We love it. We love sharing our passion for the sport and connecting with people. And, if there's any knowledge that I can share or help people, point them in the direction of cyclocross. And that's what we're here for. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for joining me in the red. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so yet, please like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All of that kind of helps us get the word out, help grow the show. And we'll be back next year. Well, we'll be back next season, but also next year. Probably after that too. We'll just keep it rolling, Tony.
Lots of good stuff ahead, man. Lots of good stuff ahead.
All right, everyone. Take care. Stay healthy. Keep riding. We'll catch up with you soon.